You are listening to the Mom2Mom Podcast, hosted by Stephanie Sinclair, founder and owner of How2Mom. This podcast is meant to empower women and bring the community together through storytelling and education. During these episodes, you will hear stories of triumph, heartache, and hope. You will hear time-tested tips and tricks shared by mamas and women. You will hear a variety of birth stories that will resonate with all birthing families, advice from professionals who have dedicated their teachings to pregnancy, birth, and moms. Here, you will find encouragement, support, and community, because we are your community, and we are so happy to have you. Now, on to today's episode. Hi, you guys. It's Stephanie Sinclair here for today's first podcast episode. I'm so excited. This one will be just an interview with myself. I just wanted to take this first episode to really kind of introduce myself, to give you guys a little bit of background information about How2Mom, when we started, why we do the work that we do, and why we are launching this podcast to begin with. So first of all, I just want to say welcome. I want to say thank you so much for being here. You have no idea how much it means to me. This podcast has been in the works for years. I have envisioned doing this for a long time, but just like motherhood, there is a season for everything. And it wasn't until this year that it all made sense and lined up. So thanks so much for believing in me, believing in How2Mom, and for being here. So first and foremost, I am Stephanie Sinclair. I am the founder and owner of How2Mom. How2Mom was founded in 2015. I always refer to How2Mom as my fourth baby, and it really truly is. First and foremost, I am a wife of 12 years to my amazing husband, Brian. He has always been one of my number one supporters along with my parents. He has always believed in me. He's believed in my mission, and he has always believed in How2Mom and the difference that we're making for women and for families during their pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and motherhood years. We have 3 kids together. So my oldest, Mackenzie, is going to be 10 this June, which is insane to think that I have been a mom for a decade. It really truly does go so fast. And it just doesn't feel like it was that long ago that I became a mom. So that in itself is just absolutely crazy. And then we have almost 6-year-old boy-girl twins, Deacon and Brinley. And that has been another very humbling experience. I birthed or founded How2Mom in 2015. And so Mackenzie was just about a year and a half, almost 2 years old, I believe. Actually, no, she was a year and a half. And it's not at all that I felt like I had this whole motherhood gig down, but I definitely felt like I had gained some confidence. I had gained some knowledge. I had entered the birth world as a birth doula. And so I just felt much more prepared, and I really wanted to share that knowledge with other moms. And I really wanted to support other families through their birth journey. And then I got pregnant with twins. And it was like this crazy, humbling experience. Like, you think you know, but you know nothing. So then all of a sudden I had to educate myself about what it would look like to carry twins, to birth twins, to nurse 2 babies, all of the things. So it has been an incredibly humbling experience as a mom. And we have this community here, not because we know it all, but because I didn't want to feel alone in this journey. I was very overwhelmed by motherhood. I felt like I constantly had a gazillion tabs open at a time on my computer and in my brain of how to cook healthy for a baby, how to find the safest products for a baby, how to birth, how to raise, how to potty train, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so there is where the name How To with the number 2 Mom came about. So through this work in the last almost 8 years, it really started with me serving families and helping educate, prepare, and support them for birth. And it has just really evolved into something bigger, and this community, which I'm just so thankful for. And I want everybody to know that I definitely designed this to hopefully give and provide value to other families. But what was so cool and such a full circle moment was when I was home with the twins that first year postpartum, the community really showed up for me. And it's actually what kept me going through motherhood. And so it was just kind of that reassurance of how needed this community is. And I felt it from the other end. And so that definitely lit an even bigger fire for me to continue to keep going and to keep growing what we already had, but make it more accessible and more available to more families. And so it was kind of at that time, I was an active birth doula. And I had served a lot of families and gained a lot of experience and just found a huge passion for this work. And it's kind of interesting because I feel like I first started, of course, because I, had a love for birth and the process that my husband and I went through while preparing to birth Mackenzie, it was so empowering. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. Like we get to decide what we want this moment and this journey to look like. We get to decide who we want in this birth space. And just after I had her, it wasn't because her birth went perfectly as planned. But it was because after I had her and they put her on my chest, I remember just looking around the room and I felt so empowered and I felt so loved and respected. And I was just surrounded by all these incredible people that made me feel incredible. And I thought, I want to make other families feel this way. I know it was super helpful for my husband as well to have a doula and a really great provider care team, because then he felt like he got the tools to be this active participant that he wanted to be without having any knowledge or experience with labor and birth. And that was really kind of the initial driver, right, to become a birth doula. And so I just started serving families right away and really wanted to gain all of that experience and continue to do this work and reach more. But then when I had the twins, it kind of halted a little bit, right? Because I was home nursing two babies. I was continuing to get inquiries, but I wasn't necessarily able to show up as the doula I wanted to be, or I just couldn't take on that much on my own, plus be home with three kids. And so it was then in 2017 and into 2018 that we completely redid our website. So we took it from one site, we brought it to another site, revamped everything, and started providing free content. So blogging every week, getting free content out there so that families, even if they weren't in the position to hire a birth doula, they would still get the knowledge and information around pregnancy and birth and postpartum and baby care and breastfeeding and all of the above. And so that really took off then. But that at that same time is when we started growing the team here at How2Mom. So we have an incredible team of birth professionals. We have birth doulas, postpartum doulas, lactation counselors, placenta encapsulators, photographers for birth and newborn and family photos. We also have a prenatal dietitian. We have spent years networking with chiropractors and acupuncturists and pelvic floor therapists, really trying to create this one-stop shop so that motherhood or parenthood doesn't have to feel so overwhelming for you. We try to do a lot of the legwork so that even if we're not the expert in the area that you need support, we can supply resources, information, and referrals that are trusted and known. And so it's just been so fun to kind of watch this grow and to be here today, not only launching courses as childbirth educators, but also launching this podcast. The reason why I think this podcast is unique is because we're going to have a combination of episodes. So we are going to be interviewing experts in the birth world, bringing free information and resources to all of you. But then we're also going to have a really great combination of birth stories. So clients of ours sharing their amazing birth stories that give a variety of what birth can look and feel like. There's no right way to birth a baby, and we need to share more stories that show the variation of what birth can look like. So I'm just really excited for this to come out. I'm excited for you guys to be here and to listen. And I thought I just would share kind of the birth of How to Mom, our background, who the heck I am. And also I'm just going to leave you guys with some information based off of like my own birth stories. You can definitely find more detailed information on our blog. I've done blog posts for both. I've been interviewed on other podcasts as a guest regarding my birth stories. So there's a lot more information out there. But I don't want to keep you too long today. And I want you to know that you can expect an episode coming out every week here from the Mom2Mom podcast. And I just really look forward to hopefully fulfilling you guys with a ton of resources and value. So rewind 10 plus years ago, pregnant Stephanie, brand new mom, 27 years old, I believe. I had gone to a prenatal yoga class at Bluma in Minneapolis, and I was so fixated on getting pregnant because we had gone through a lot of infertility issues that I never really thought about birth until I was pregnant. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, there's more to it than like going to a hospital and having a baby. Like there are options and wishes and desires and providers to choose from. And I just was like really taken aback. I had not thought about it at all. So through that prenatal yoga class, I felt like I learned so much. And I was like, oh my gosh, like there's so much out there to learn about this process, and there are so many options. And that was the first time I had heard of a birth doula. And I remember I came home and I told Brian, I said, I think we need to hire a birth doula. And he was like, what's that? And I was like, I don't know, but I think we need one. I had no idea what a birth doula was. I had no idea what they did. I had a couple of friends who were kind of in the same space as I was at the time. Some were hiring birth doulas, some were not. And so I just kind of dove in and started educating myself about what a doula is, what type of support they provide, and what kind of birth Brian and I desired. And so we ended up hiring a birth doula, getting tons of education, deciding what we wanted that journey to look like and feel like. I gave birth at Woodwinds Hospital in Woodbury. As a first-time mom, I was shocked to wake up in the middle of the night. I think I was 39 weeks pregnant in like 4 days, I believe, something like that. So first of all, super shocked that anything started before 40 weeks. Even more shocked that my water broke, because you hear so much like, don't expect for your water to break as a first-time mom. Literally, I'm not even kidding you guys. I heard an internal pop when my water released. It was crazy. It woke me up out of a sleep. It even woke my husband up. He's like, what was that? I was like, I think my water just broke. Went to the bathroom, sat on the toilet. I was so excited and anxious as a first-time mom. It was like classic first-time mom anxiety, just like excitement, all of the things, right? Running around the house, no underwear on, no pants on. And my husband's like, can you like sit down on the toilet? Like, what are you doing? Amniotic fluid's going everywhere. Ended up calling our doula, called our provider. Our provider wanted us to come in pretty quickly. I shouldn't say pretty quickly, but of course advised to come into the hospital. I ended up finally kind of calming down, and I fell back asleep for a couple hours. I got a good chunk of nap in. After that happened, it was like 2 a.m. and I think I fell back asleep until like 6 or 7. Ended up getting up, showering, had a good bite to eat. Of course, all of that was advised from my doula. Went in to the hospital, you guys, and contractions did not follow my water breaking. And so I also too just remember like getting swabbed and them telling me that it was negative for amniotic fluid. And I was so confused because I was like, nope, my water for sure broke. Like this was not urine. You hear this a lot from first-time moms. And I really just like followed my intuition and just continued to reassure them that yes, this was this was amniotic fluid. I think what happened is Mackenzie dropped after my water broke and either like recorked that amniotic fluid, or maybe it was just my outer sac that actually broke and was leaking. I'm not quite sure still to this day, but it definitely was amniotic fluid and it was not urine. So there's kind of like some back and forth, lots of hours kind of in triage. They ended up sending me for an ultrasound. I had plenty of fluid. And so they, again, were like, are you sure? And then it was like that moment I had another gush and they were able to test that fluid. And yes, it came back as amniotic fluid, which we knew. So we were admitted. I was very determined to get labor going on my own. I remember the midwife having a conversation with us about, really wanting to see contractions starting. This was back, like I said, 10 years ago. So at that time, they were kind of treating based off of this 24-hour clock. And I just remember, because of the work I had done with my doula, I declined Pitocin and I said I really wanted to get labor going on my own. So we did lots of nipple stimulation. We did lots of walking, resting, kind of bouncing on the ball. And I was so excited and so proud that I was able to get contractions going all on our own. And so it was like, I don't know, probably 6 p.m. I think I had just had dinner. And then right after I had dinner, contractions started. And so I labored in the tub, probably for about, I don't know, off and on for like 4 to 6 hours. I remember my doula telling me that I was handling things and coping so well. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I don't feel like I'm coping well, because internally I was telling myself all of these negative thoughts instead of encouraging myself. Just was very surprised as a first-time mom what labor contractions felt like. At this point, it was like, I don't know, 1 a.m. in the morning, and exhaustion really set in. So yes, I had gotten that couple-hour nap earlier that morning, but I think the day was just very long, trying to get things going, obviously emotionally exhausting. I had decided at that point to go ahead and get an epidural. I was never opposed to an epidural. I definitely wanted to try for an unmedicated birth. That was kind of my desire, just through the education that I had had. But I also wasn't opposed to it because I knew first-time mom labors could be quite long. And it was kind of one of those moments where it was like, okay, I can either get an epidural and I can get some rest and still have a vaginal birth, or I can continue like this, not get any rest, and potentially not be able to push my baby out. And so it made sense for me, and it aligned with our values and our wishes to get that epidural. It was a heavy epidural. I see some of my clients today who get these epidurals and they're so mobile, like they're just able to move. We're able to get them on all fours. We're able to get them in tons of different positions. I don't know if I would have been able to do that. Like, I just remember not at all feeling the urge to push and feeling super heavy. However, it did do its job in the sense that I got a lot of rest. I think I slept off and on for about 6 hours. And when it was shift change for our midwives, which I was so sad because the midwife that was on overnight was just my favorite, and the one I treated with all through my pregnancy. I loved her. She was getting off work. But it's interesting how everything kind of aligns. I remember the new midwife coming in and I was thinking like, oh, she wasn't necessarily my first pick, but she ended up being exactly who I needed in that moment. When my water had broke, well over 24 hours at this point, I think I was at like 27 or 30 hours, there was meconium. And so Mackenzie had pooped when my water broke. And so obviously they're always kind of watching for the risk of infection for both mom, and they're watching so that when baby is born, baby doesn't aspirate that meconium. And so I woke up, had felt really rested. I remember really wanting to brush my teeth, which is hilarious. I remember my midwife checking me, telling me I was complete and I was ready to push. And I was kind of like, I don't know, relaxed about it. And all of a sudden things did get kind of serious kind of quickly. I had spiked a fever and Mackenzie was showing some D cells. And so they were getting a little bit concerned that there might be infection occurring for both of us. And so I remember not loving this midwife, but she was exactly who I needed. I remember her looking at me and she was like, I need you to have this baby and I need you to have this baby soon. And obviously, as a first time mom, it's not uncommon for first time moms to push anywhere from like 1 to 3 hours. I remember the seriousness in her eyes. And I remember thinking, I just need to have this baby. And I think I only pushed for like 25 minutes with Mackenzie, which I still can't believe, but pushed for 25 minutes, had Mackenzie. She did get some of the meconium, obviously, like in her nose and in her mouth. And so they did bring her to the warmer and kind of suctioned all of that, but she recovered really, really quickly and then was brought to my chest. My fever went away. All was good. And so again, did it go all as perfectly as planned? No, but I felt so educated in the process. And Brian and I continued to make decisions that felt right for us and our family versus being told what we were going to do. So that is just some information on my first birth. My second birth is even more interesting. So I was pregnant, obviously, with boy-girl twins. For most of the pregnancy, baby A, which is Deacon, was head down, and baby B, Brinley, was breech. Here in the Twin Cities, you can deliver a breech baby if it's twin B. So if twin A is breech, that's an automatic surgical birth. But because Deacon was head down, I was able to do a vaginal birth. And then if Brinley was breech, at that time, they would either try and turn her to go head down, or my doctor was comfortable with delivering her breech. I was not a huge fan of that idea, but I was open to it. I had lots of conversations with our doula and with our provider about what we desired for this birth. We did have to deliver in the OR at Woodwinds. I was over 38 weeks pregnant with twins, and we decided to move forward with a induction. I had been contracting for like, I don't know, a week and a half, definitely some prodromal labor. Every night I felt like, okay, this is it. Like things are happening. And then I would fall asleep and I'd wake up the next morning and the contractions were completely gone. The medical suggestion is induction at like 38 weeks with twins, just based off of kind of the placenta capacity. It felt right to us. We didn't move forward right at 38 weeks because we were trying all the things. And I really wanted to see if my body went into labor on its own, especially because it was showing signs and it was definitely preparing. And I had been going to the chiropractor and the acupuncturist, and we were doing intercourse and like all of the things to see if babies would come on their own. At 38 weeks and 4 days, we went to the hospital. I think it was a Thursday morning at like 7 a.m. And I was already dilated, I feel like, to a 2 or 2.5. And so we were comfortable with kind of just starting a low dose of Pitocin at that time. My doula came quite early, which was amazing. We were super active during the induction process. We were doing positioning. We were alternating rest and movement. And my body kicked into gear pretty dang quickly. And I remember actually the special sauce was my parents brought Mackenzie up. So she was 3 at the time. And I had asked them to come up for a visit, and I wanted to snuggle and see my baby one more time before all the dynamics changed in our family. And I remember my mom coming and Mackenzie just really kind of snuggling into me and us just hugging and kissing and talking about her baby brother and her baby sister. And that is when I went into full-blown active labor. To the point where I had to kind of cut the visit short because I could tell things were getting serious pretty quickly. And I didn't know if Mackenzie would be comfortable kind of witnessing that. I had a very strong desire to go unmedicated this time. I felt like it was more achievable since my body had done this before. And my provider and I had lots of conversations about what that could mean and what that would look like with delivering twins. And so I was only probably in active labor with Deacon for about 6 hours, which is much more manageable than like a 12 to 24 hour labor. So, as a second time mom, I definitely noticed a difference. And I just was very active. I did use nitrous oxide. I was able to labor in our room up until I was just about fully dilated. Um, was really on the ball a lot, kind of up on my feet, leaning into the bed, swaying, listening to really great music, snuggling with my husband. My doula was constantly applying counter pressure to my back. And it just was really beautiful. It was exactly what I had desired. And then I remember that I went to go empty my bladder, and all of a sudden I kind of just instinctively started bearing down. And I was so excited to be feeling that because I did not feel that at all with Mackenzie. And so my provider came in at that time after I emptied my bladder. He had me get into bed so that he could check my cervix. And I think I was at like a 9 or a 9.5. Excuse me. And so they wheeled me into the OR again to have a vaginal birth, but they want to be in the OR just in case of any emergencies, just because some of the risks are a little bit higher or can be higher with twins. Although I had a very, very normal pregnancy. You're considered high risk with multiples. I would not consider my pregnancy high risk. I remember telling my doula to call my mom, that I wanted her to get there in time for their births. And what I did not know when they wheeled me into the OR is that I no longer had access to nitrous oxide. And if you have ever been in labor and you have ever used nitrous oxide and used that to cope and felt like you got into a really amazing rhythm, when something is taken away from you, it feels like the worst. And I just remember saying, like, no way, you cannot take that away from me. Like, I need that. I'm in full blown active labor. Like, I'm about to push my babies out. Is there any way? And so I think it took them a good, like, I don't know, 45 minutes to an hour. They kept telling me that they couldn't have it in the OR. And I was like, why? Get an extension cord. Like, just help me out. I need the nitrous. So they were able to finally get that to me. And that really, really helped. I actually think they didn't get it to me until after Deacon was born. So I pretty much started to push right when we got into the OR with Deacon, and he was born 10 minutes later. It was really actually pretty fast. So fast that my mom didn't make it. By the time she got there, Deacon was already on my chest. So I always say he was like my easiest birth, like 6 hours of active labor, 10 minutes pushing. He was out. He was amazing, beautiful size, crying. It was beautiful. But then I remember looking down at my belly, and I remember seeing just this huge bump baby super high on my right side, which is where Brinley always was. But usually with twins, the second twin kind of labors down with that first twin, or at least does so right after, and is like born a couple minutes later. That was not the case with Brinley. Rewind a little bit, just weeks before we went in to be induced, I woke up in the middle of the night. I felt super off, super weird. I didn't know what it was at the time. I just said something doesn't feel right. Got up, went to the bathroom, and basically fainted, which had not been abnormal. I had fainted a couple times when I was pregnant with the twins. And I think it was just because my airway, there was just some restriction with having so much baby. But I just felt this huge rush, like my whole body all of a sudden got super warm, and I kind of fell on to the toilet, and like just everything let go. And the next ultrasound we had, Brinley was head down. So I strongly believe it was in that moment that Brinley turned, and it just was a lot for my body. So anyway, she did not labor down. Both Brian and I looked at each other. We thought, well, this doesn't seem right. I remember my provider telling me to continue to push. When I pushed with Deacon, it felt so good. It was like this relief. Pushing felt amazing because you weren't like having to get through these contractions. All of a sudden during these contractions, you were able to bear down, and it just felt good. But when I was pushing with Brinley, it did not feel good. It just was, it felt painful. It felt wrong. It felt off. I also remember all of the contraction pain going from my lower abdomen to my back. Literally, it felt like my back was like breaking apart. And that, I think, is when I was like, I need the nitrous. You need to get that nitrous back. I think I even was like, I need an epidural. And they were like, you can't get an epidural at this point. Like, you've already delivered a baby. You have like a cord hanging out of your vagina. Like, but I was like, I need something. I need some help. And so they were able to get the nitrous to me. Thank God. And that helped. Because pushing didn't feel good, my provider was like, it's okay. You don't need to push. Let's just continue to labor. I continued to labor with Brinley for another hour. I remember going, what is wrong? What's happening? And my provider was so great and so patient and was like, nothing's wrong. She just needs more time. I do remember they did increase the Pitocin at this time because my uterus was fatigued. And we just continued to labor. And I remember I said out loud, I was like, I think at this point it was like 10:30 p.m. And I was like, oh my gosh, am I going to have this baby today? And a nurse was like, oh yeah, there's no way that you're not going to have this baby today. And I swear to this day, she jinxed me. So anyways, I continued to labor, and she did labor down a little bit, and we got to a point where she was having some really big decels, and she was still recovering, but she was having a harder time. And so my provider had talked to us about doing an assisted vaginal delivery with the vacuum. At this point, I was open to it because I really wanted to try everything before having a surgical birth, if possible. I also knew, because I had opted to not get an epidural with this labor, that if there was an emergency and I needed a surgical birth, that I would have to get put under general anesthesia, which was not ideal. But I knew it was a risk I was willing to take to try and have these babies unmedicated. And so I was open to the vacuum assisted delivery. My provider attempted the vacuum once. I remember hearing this huge pop because I think it didn't suction and it didn't stay during the push. And so it popped off. He said he was willing to try one more time, and only one more time, because she was starting to have decels like into the 50s. Again, she was still recovering, but she was taking longer to recover. And so we were getting a little bit uneasy with how she was doing. He said he would try again. I remember Brian looking at me and he was like, you really need to push this baby out. Otherwise you're having a C-section. And I was like, I know, I'm trying. Like I was so tired, but I was like, I'm trying so hard here. He attached the vacuum again. We went through pushes again. She was moving, but she wasn't moving enough. She was stuck. I do feel like, looking back, if I could have got on all fours, maybe that would have helped, because I'm pretty positive. Well, actually, I know she was posterior, and I think she was having a really hard time getting underneath my pubic bone. So I feel like if I could have got on all fours, I really could have like made room for her, had some flexibility in my sacrum, and with gravity, like that would have helped her get under the pubic bone. But again, it was the situation that I was in. They didn't feel comfortable with me getting on all fours because I had already delivered a baby, and then I had not delivered Deacon's placenta, and so I still had the cord hanging out. But again, in the moment, right, I'm a birthing mom. I'm not thinking as a doula per se. And so when he attached the vacuum that second time, we went through the pushing. Just like before, Brinley had a decel. Her heart rate went down into the 50s, but unfortunately this time she did not recover. And so it was immediate. It was so fast. The C-section was called. I don't even think I got a second to say goodbye to Brian or to my doula or to my mom. Actually, I think my mom at this point was already in the nursery with Deacon, because he was hungry at this point and he needed some donor milk. So my mom was feeding him in the nursery. So they moved me onto the surgical table. Again, they all did their best, and there was a lot going on, and the safety of my baby was number one. But I do remember I had to advocate pretty strongly to remind them that I was still in labor and I was unmedicated. And so thank God, I don't even know who it was. I'm pretty sure it wasn't a nurse. I'm pretty sure was the anesthesiologist or the esthetist, like the anesthesiologist assistant, heard me and came over and grabbed my cheeks and just looked me in the eyes. And she was like, "It's going to be okay. Just breathe with me." And I don't even really remember being super concerned about Brinley in that moment. I'm sure I was, but I just was so consumed with still being in labor and still going through a lot of pain. And so she really helped me kind of calm and breathe. And I kept saying, "Just put me under, put me under." And they said, "We have to wait until the very last second to put you under general anesthesia for the safety of you and for baby." It was that moment that my provider came around. He looked me in the eyes and he said, "You're going to be okay. And so is your baby." And I trusted him with everything. Obviously, I trusted him with my life and I trusted him with my baby's life. And I just knew I was at peace. I knew that she was going to be okay. I knew that we had tried everything we could to have her vaginally, and that this was just the way that she needed to be born. And so I woke up about 2 hours later in recovery. My doula was so great in making sure that only Brian held Brinley until I was out of recovery. I remember waking up and asking the nurse if my daughter was okay. And she said, "Yes, everybody's healthy. Everybody's good." I remember knowing that Deacon was 6 pounds, 9 ounces. And I remember asking her how much my daughter weighed. She told me 7 pounds, 10 ounces. And I was like, shut the front door. I could not believe her size. And so a lot of it made sense. She did have a little bit of injury to her forehead, which definitely reassured us that she was posterior. So instead of the vacuum kind of connecting to the crown of her head, it was connecting to her forehead. It explains my back labor, and her kind of issues with, navigating the pelvis. I do think that when she went head down weeks prior, that she almost got into a really awkward position and just was never really able to get into a better position for labor and delivery. I also noticed a lot of that, during her baby stages, and we treated with the chiropractor because she had a lot of digestive issues, acid reflux. She also had a tongue tie, like all the things. Brinley had all the things. And she still to this day kind of complains about some neck issues. And so it's really interesting to me how all of that is connected and can play a role. But anyways, there is my birth stories I thought I would share with you guys. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, please let me know. I can definitely answer those or go into some more detail about any of the areas. But thank you so much for listening, and sending you love. All right, you guys, that is it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed. If so, please subscribe to our podcast, comment, share, give us feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen, and we will see you next time.